Goal in this whole process is to differentiate yourself from the competition. And so you start differentiating yourself with a great resume. You start differentiating yourself joining Delta Sigma Pi and being active in the chapter. If you're interviewing with me on the phone and you know that I'm a brother, make sure you understand that I might ask you, when was your chapter meeting? And the reason I ask that question to every brother is because I hated when our chapter meeting was, because it was every Monday night and I had to miss Monday Night Football. Since 1992 to 1994, for 2.5 years after I pledged, that was our night of our chapter meetings. So I'll never forget that it was Monday night. I have interviewed Delta Sigs that say they were active, and I will say, when was your meeting, or when was the meeting night? And they'll say, you know what? I don't remember. And that to me is a strike against them, because I'm like, okay, they only joined to put it on their resume. They weren't active. So I might ask you the password. I might, say, and I don't know if are these all brothers? Shanda, are there any pledges on? You're on mute.
I can't confirm that at the moment.
That's
so
fine.
Let's
So I won't pass it, but I'm just saying I might see, but here's the deal. When you're interviewing, I want to make sure that you're telling me about Delta Sigma Pi and explaining it like experience, time management, process management, conflict resolution, motivational skills, presentation skills, recruitment skills, finance skills. So when you're telling me about Delta Sigma Pi, don't always talk about, oh, it's a Greek organization and we had a lot of fun. Is actually use it as job experience, because that's kind of how I'm looking at Delta Sig. So the point that I'm bringing up is, on a phone interview, I'm going to ask you a series of those questions. I might ask, tell me about yourself. Why are you interested in my company? What do you know about my company? Why did you pick the major you picked? And then I'm going to ask you a magical question. How much money do you want to make your first year? I don't want you answering that question. Don't tell me I want to make 50 grand a year. Don't say anything. And here's what I want you to say is, compensation is not my driving force. I'm interested in the culture. I'm interested in finding a place where I can make a difference. So once I know the role and responsibility, then we can talk about compensation. So again, you don't need to answer it, because here's what I'm trying to do in a phone interview. I'm trying to pigeonhole you. If you tell me you want to make 35 grand a year and I'm willing to pay 50, how much do you think I'm going to pay you when we interview? I'm going to pay you 35 grand a year. And that's kind of a scumbag move. I get it. But if you tell me you want 35, I'm going to pay you 35. That's why you never want to talk about comp until you understand fully what the role and responsibility is. So a screen interview, again, dress up for the interview, have notes out in front of you, have your resume out in front of you. And then lastly is have 3 questions to ask. Always ask a question. Even if it's only one question, I want you to ask a question in every interview you're in, because I need to know that you're interested. If you don't ask a question, I think you're not interested. So ask me a question such as, what are the traits of your best performers? Can you explain what's the onboarding process look like? What's the growth of the company? I see on your website that you open an office in Europe. Can you tell me a little bit about the expansion into Europe? Or I see that you do renewable energy work. Can you tell me a little bit about, the future or trends of renewable energy? And again, what you're trying to do is show me that you've done a little bit of homework and you're showing me that you're interested. Now, if you get the sense that I'm annoyed after your 3rd question, don't ask any more questions. But I want you to ask a couple questions to show me you're interested. The goal of a phone interview is to win me over to get invited to the first interview. Does that make sense? Your goal of a phone interview is to win the interview for me to invite you back for another interview. So at the end of the call, when I say, Brooke, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you being on this call. We're really interested. I will give you a call. And what I want you to say, Brooke, is say, thank you very much for your time. I'm really interested in this opportunity. If I don't hear from you in 2 weeks, is it okay if I call you? So what you're doing is you're pre-closing me. And so you're not always waiting, by the phone if I don't call right away. So that's how you typically want to close the interview and ask a couple questions. So let me start there. Any questions about the phone interview? Okay. And again, I'll give you my contact information. So in the next interview, so now we're getting into the crux of the formal interviews. So the 4 interviews that you guys will face, everybody in the room will do a phone interview, like I mentioned. Number 2 is a face-to-face interview. And that's where I'm going to invite you in either a Zoom call, which is face-to-face, or an in-person interview. If you live in Michigan, where I live in Ann Arbor, we're on complete lockdown. It's probably going to be a Zoom call. If you're in Florida, I'd probably do a face-to-face call. But that's the second interview, is a face-to-face interview. The third interview is called a meal interview. And a meal interview is where I will take, if the position that you're interviewing for is a customer-facing position, there's a good chance that I'm going to take you to lunch. Or I might ask you to go to breakfast. Because part of my logic of a meal interview is I want to see how you operate in public. Do you chew with your mouth open? Do you have manners? Do you put your elbows on the table? Do you eat sloppy? Are you rude to the waiter? I'm want to see all these things, because if you're in a customer-facing job, I want to know how you'd be in public. So that's the meal interview. And only those of you that are interviewing for a customer-facing role or a public role will probably do a meal interview. Not everybody will. And then the fourth interview is a group interview. And a group interview is typically called a stress interview, and it's designed to stress you out. Typically, group interviews are for jobs like social work, teachers, police work, any job that's a little bit stressful that you have to deal with a lot of people. Typically, they will do a group interview or a stress interview, and that is where you're going to walk into a room and you're going to have a panel of people in front of you, and they're going to ask a series of questions quickly to see how you respond under pressure. So let's start with the first one. I talked about the phone interview. Let's start with the first interview, which is a face-to-face. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to do the same preparation that you did for the phone interview. Research the company. Research their products and services. Research their office locations. Google the company name. Google their name and to see, are there any press releases? Have there been any announcements about the company? Are there any lawsuits against the company? Now, don't bring that up in the interview, but it might give you a sense for, do you want to work for a company that the CEO just got put in jail? But anyway, look for that kind of stuff. So Google the company. There is an awesome tool called Google Alerts. It's called Google Alerts. So write that down. And so as you're going through your job search process, my goal is for you to narrow down or not boil the ocean. It's to narrow down and answer these basic questions. What industry do you want to work in? So what industry do you have passion for? What type of job do you want to have? Where do you want to live? My goal is for you to identify 5 to 10 target companies, and that's it. Again, my goal is for you to identify 5 to 10 firms that you want to work for, and then research the heck out of those 5 or 10 firms. And that's where you want to research where they have offices, what type of products or services do they have, what type of business do they have, what type of press releases have recently gone through. And the reason I brought up Google Alerts is you can actually put your company name. So go into Google, type in Google Alerts, a box will come up. It'll say, give me your email address, which you'll do. And then another box will come up and say, what company do you want research on? Put in the company name in that box. Every time they're in the news or every time they're on Google, you're going to get an email. So imagine walking into an interview and saying, I just heard that Atwell was starting to do battery storage, and one of your clients is Tesla. I saw it in a press release. I see that you guys are working with Tesla. Can you tell me a little bit about that work? How impressed would I be if you as a college student brought up that question? It's a complete differentiator. That's your goal, is to do research in the companies to identify that information. So research the company, write it down, take notes on the company, have a folder for each one of your companies that you research. Then what I want you to do is research the people that are interviewing you. So when the recruiter calls you and says, Abby, I want to schedule an interview, does 2:00 on Thursday work okay? I want Abby, you to say, absolutely, 2:00 on Tuesday is perfect. Who will I be interviewing with? And they're going to give you the name, and then I want you to stalk that person. Not physically. Don't look in their windows. I just want you to look them up online, look them up on LinkedIn, look them up on Facebook. You don't have to friend them. You're not reaching out to have them become a friend on Facebook, but you're trying to get a sense for who they are. Like as an example, and this is kind of a stupid example, but it came up the other day in an interview. In fact, it came up today. So on my Facebook page, I'm actually in a band. My band is called Midlife, and I'm a drummer in a band called Midlife. And we're not Midlife Crisis. We're not there yet, but we play pop rock, we play Green Day and stuff like that. Well, I had a candidate say, hey, I saw that you have a picture of a band. Are you in a band? And man, I thought that was a perfect introduction to a conversation to relax the mood. And so I'm excited about talking about it. I talk about the songs, and he tells me he's a musician and he plays a Gretsch guitar and all kinds of things that I found out about the guy. And again, I believe he won over the interview with that simple question. So research the people. So Abby, you're going to ask, who am I interviewing with? And then I want you to go to Facebook. I want you to go to LinkedIn, and I want you to research who you're going to interview with. And again, your goal is to make a friend with that person. So research the firms, and then again, have 3 questions prepared going into the interview. So now in a face-to-face interview, here's what I want you to do. We won't even talk about virtual yet. Let's just talk about real-time in person. I want you to get to the interview and get to the office 15 minutes early. So make sure you understand traffic patterns, get on Waze, identify how to get there. Do not be late for the interview. That is a kiss of death. Because I'm taking time out of my day on my schedule to interview you, you better be on time. So research the market, research the traffic pattern, get there 15 minutes early for a couple reasons. I want you to make sure you know where the building is. I want you to get to the office, and if they have a public restroom, go into the restroom, check yourself over. Just look yourself over. Make sure your tie is tight. Make sure you have your face is clear. Make sure you have nothing in your teeth. It's the little things like that. Some tips to take on this trip. Take a wet washcloth and shine your shoes one last time before the interview. Take a lint roller. Lint yourself off before you go into the interview. Check yourself over. Make sure you look, you don't have anything in your teeth, and you look presentable. If it's raining, take an umbrella. I know this sounds stupid, but guys, like for instance, how many guys carry umbrellas? We run, right? You don't carry an umbrella. You run through the rain, where if you get to the interview and you're soaking wet, again, it's going to impact the interview. So be prepared for the interview. Prepare for the trip to the office. Arrive 15 minutes early. Go into the lobby and understand that receptionist is a person. That receptionist has a lot of power. So don't be rude. Don't be patronizing. But I want you to treat the person with respect. Good morning. My name is Tim Augustine. Nice to meet you. I know I'm 15 minutes early. Is it okay if I sit in the lobby? I'm here to see Jerry Beaver. And my conversation I know is 15 minutes ahead of time. Is it okay if I sit in the lobby? If you treat that person with respect, it goes a long way. In fact, there was a candidate that I interviewed that when I interviewed him face to face, I actually thought he was kind of a jerk. And I got this sense that he was a little cocky. Well, I went out to Michelle, our receptionist. I said, Michelle, how did David treat you? She goes, well, I'm glad you asked. He was an absolute jerk. He came in and said, hey, my name is David. I'm here to see Tim Augustine. Do you have a cup of coffee I could have or something to drink real quick? So he didn't treat her with respect at all. Not that that's the end all be all, but I will tell you that played into my decision to not invite him back. Because in our company, we believe everybody's equal. Everybody has an important job to do. And if he thought he was better than our receptionist, he wouldn't fit in the culture. So just keep that in mind. Get there 15 minutes early. Here's what you want to bring to your interview. Bring freshly printed resumes. Don't photocopy them. Print them off on your printer. Bring freshly copy of your resume. Bring information about your past jobs. One thing you're going to have to fill out, and it happens all the time. Now, some companies like ours, we allow applications to be filled out ahead of time digitally, but you're going to be asked to fill out an application. And that application is going to give me everything about your past jobs. What job did you have? What was your title? What was your boss's name? What was their phone number? What was their address? How much did you make? Like if you worked at Dairy Queen, I want to know, how much did you make at Dairy Queen? If you worked at McDonald's, what did you do at McDonald's? So the reason I say bring this stuff with you is I don't want you freaking out because you don't know an answer on your application. Interviewing is already stressful enough. But if you have this information with you, you're going to be able to fill out the application with ease. Dates, times, boss's name, contact information, stuff like that. In a lot of cases, I might give you the application and ask you to send it back. So take it home and fill it out. But just in case they ask you to fill it out there, you're going to have the information with you. The last thing I want you to bring is bring 3 references. So on one piece of paper, you're going to have 3 references. It's not on your resume. It's a separate piece of paper. I'm looking for 3 references. I'm looking for a personal reference of a friend. I'm looking for a professional reference of somebody you used to work for. And then I'm looking for an academic reference. So a professor. So ask those individuals, would they be willing to be a reference for you? Have their contact information. Don't give it to me until I ask for it. But then in the interview, I'm going to ask, do you have references? And you're able to hand it over. The last thing I would recommend is have something with you like a pad folio, a hard pad folio that you have the information inside, and then have your interview questions with you. So 3 resumes, a reference letter, a reference information on their name, address, contact info, your application details, and then 3 questions that you want to ask me during the interview. Does that make sense? And then remember the little things, the washcloth, the lint roller, those kind of things. Shandy, you had a question.
No, I think Dana had a question. I saw her hand up earlier, and I was going to her ask real quick.
Perfect. Dana, what's your question?
I was honestly going to ask, I didn't know if you were going to talk about this after, about how early would you arrive for Zoom interviews now?
Okay, 5 minutes.
Okay.
I had a Zoom interview today, and the guy arrived half hour early, and I use my Zoom account for all my meetings. So he popped up in the middle of my meeting saying, "I'm ready for the interview." I'm like, "Oh my God, 1, you're an overachiever. Half hour is a little too early." Yeah. So 5 minutes ahead is what I recommend for a Zoom call.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Sorry, I was just wondering about timing.
No, that's a great question. Great question. And I'll talk about Zoom interviews here in a second. So a face-to-face, get there 15 minutes early, go into the interview, and treat it like a relationship. You want to win them over. If it's an icebreaker, if you notice something about their background, or you notice that they have a sailboat on the wall, or they have a sports, a picture of a stadium. It's okay to ask. So are you a Browns fan? Are you a Detroit Lions fan? Or, something like that. But make sure if you do ask that question, you can follow up with something credible. So don't say, "Oh my gosh, you have a sailboat. That's fantastic." And I asked, "Do you sail?" And you're like, "No, I don't know anything about sailing." That would be weird. So you want an icebreaker if you have it. But in the interview, here's what's going to happen. You're going to have a face-to-face interview with somebody. And they're going to have you sit down, and you're going to sit down. Typically, it's going to be in a small conference room versus an office. And they're going to start asking you and firing questions. So tell me about yourself. So in preparation for this interview, make sure your elevator pitch is ready to go. And if I'm going to ask, here's the questions that I'll ask you. Tell me about yourself. So tell me about you're a member of Delta Sigma Pi, that you're on the executive committee, or you're on a leadership role, or if you tell me that you were the VP of finance, I'm going to follow up with that and say, well, how much did you raise? Or if you were the pledge educator, how many pledges did you have? Or you were the chapter president, how big did the chapter get? Like when I was the chapter president, we had 108 brothers in Beta Pi at the time. So I'm going to ask you those follow-up questions. Just be mentally prepared that I'm probably going to ask that. I will ask where you used to work. So you used to, like McDonald's. If I ask you used to work at McDonald's, and I'll say, well, what was your job at McDonald's? I don't want you to say the fryer. I might want you to say, well, I was in charge of inventory management. I worked the fryer, and I had to make sure that there were enough fries cooking because we had a 90-second window at McDonald's. And then I had to make sure enough fries were thawing. And then I had to look at the freezer every morning to make sure there was enough fries in the inventory. And if there weren't, I had to order more. So doesn't that sound more intelligent than I work the fryer? That's the idea, is that your goal is to sell some of the things that you have done and apply it to the job that I'm looking for. I'm going to look for teamwork. I'm going to look for communication skills. I'm going to look for time management skills. I'm going to ask about time management with the fraternity. So how did you manage your time? How did you keep a 3.0 GPA, have a full-time job, and go to class and be in Delta Sig? Tell me about how you keep time. So just be prepared when you're going to that face-to-face interview. Those are the kind of questions I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask, why do you want to work for my company? And you want to be able to answer that in a very positive way. I've done a lot of research. You're one of my top 5 firms. By you saying that to me, you're automatically in demand. I'm already interested. It's a competitive thing. If I hear that you're interviewing with one of my competitors, I want you even more. Now, don't throw it in my face. Don't be like, well, I'm interviewing with Kimley Horn and but if you tell me I've researched the industry, I want to be in renewable energy. I researched for firms. I found you and you're one of my top 5 firms because I'm very interested in renewable energy. I'm very interested in growing battery storage. I'm very interested in the real estate market, whatever it may be. It is critically important that you mention my industry in the interview. Mention my industry, mention real estate. And here's why. I would rather hire an accountant who has a 2.5 GPA in accounting, but has a passion for real estate than I would hire an accountant with a 4.0 GPA who doesn't care about real estate. Because in my business, I want an accountant who loves the industry that they're in because they're going to get more satisfaction out of my job. And they're going to help us perform better. So those are the type of questions I'm going to ask. Why do you want to work here? Tell me about your background. Tell me about your fraternal experience. Tell me about your jobs that you had. And then it's okay to ask personal questions, such as, how do you like working for the organization? I noticed that you've been with the company 17 years. You've stayed a long time, Tim. What keeps you at Atwell? That's a great question because people like to talk about themselves. Now, don't get too personal. I noticed that new car that you had in the parking lot because that would seem like a stalker, right? So you don't want to ask crazy questions, but again, you want to win me over. The interview will last about an hour. And then what might happen is they might ask you to go to the other room and interview with someone else. So one face-to-face doesn't mean just one person. You might have a series of one-on-one interviews. Ask the recruiter who's scheduling it ahead of time if that's going to be the case. All right. So then end the same way. If at the end of the interview, I say, listen, I'm very excited. Monica, I'm really excited. Thank you for joining the call today. Or thank you for doing the interview. I'm really excited. I want to introduce you to the team. And I'll give you a call. If I say I'm going to give you a call at the interview, I want you to come back and say, if I don't hear from you, can I call you in 2 weeks? And then tell me, I'm very interested in this opportunity. I'm excited about working this opportunity. Ask questions like, what are the traits of your best performers? What's the onboarding process look like? What type of candidates are you looking for? Do I fit the criteria that you're looking for? That's a fair question. So that all is encompassed in a face-to-face interview, again, lasting about an hour, and then they're going to ask you to leave. And then they'll call you back for a second interview. In the second interview is when you can start asking questions about benefits, about vacation time, about 401k, about tuition reimbursement. So that's when you can get a little bit more detailed in the second round of interviews than the first interview. The objective of the first interview is to be asked to come back for a second interview. You see how this is kind of a game. We did the phone interview. You won me over. I brought you in. We did a face-to-face interview. You won me over. I'm bringing you back to a third interview. And that interview is probably going to be with a team and people you might work with. So let me stop there. This is the interaction part. What questions do you have about the face-to-face interview?
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Please go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Abby.
Go ahead, Abby.
Okay. So I just have a question about group interviewing. So is the interviewer really looking for someone like yourself to like dominate the floor or like ask all the questions, or do they want you to really like let other people like chime in, or like what's the proper
Great question. So you're talking about a group interview so having other candidates in the room.
Yeah.
So Accenture does this, Deloitte and Touche does this, McKinsey does this, consulting teams do this. And here's why those firms do group interviews on the candidate side. Is because when you get hired by an Ernst & Young or Deloitte, you're typically going to be part of a team, like an audit team or a tax team, where you're going to go into a company for 6 months at a time with that team. So they need to know that you're a team player. So the objective of that, so they might bring you in, and there's two reasons they do it. One is they'll bring you into a conference room and have all your competitors sitting next to you. They don't want you to dominate. They want you to listen, and they want you to complement Like for instance, if I say, like right now, if the group interview is where I have Alexandra, I have Dana, and I have Abby. So you three are on my screen right now. If you three are in my interview, I'm not looking for Abby for you to dominate, but I might ask you, could the three of you please tell me about your time management skills? And Dana might say, I use Outlook. I schedule out my day. I schedule out everything associated with study time. I make sure I get up at the same time. I make sure I have a routine. And then I might say, okay, Abby, how do you do it? And in this case, you might say, you know what? I follow a lot of the same things. I think Dana's ideas are good ones. I follow, because what they're looking for is if you're rolling your eyes, they're looking for like, oh my God, like if you were sitting in that interview and you're like, oh my God, Dana's an idiot. Like, I can't believe Dana said that, right? They're looking to see how you respond to other team members. So complimenting them briefly, you don't have to compliment everything like, oh my God, that's a really good point. But complimenting one time, playing off each other, they're trying to see how well you adapt in a group setting. So that's what they're looking for. Now, the other way they do it is they actually, if you're over 21, they will do a social happy hour. And this is sometimes dangerous because once you have a drink, if you're 21, once you have a drink at these meetings, you're a little loose, even one drink. So they're doing that on purpose because if you are in a group setting, a client might ask, let's go to happy hour. How will you interact with other people? So here's my recommendation. If you're over 21, have one drink only and order something white, like a white wine or whatever, and then to keep that same glass and refill it with water every time you can do it. So you're holding a glass, so you're still fitting in. You're not judging them for being alcoholics or anything like that. But so I'm not, now if you don't drink, don't drink. Just don't make them feel bad. Like if they say, would you like a drink? Don't be like, oh my God, no, I don't drink at all, because then you're going to impugn me if I'm wanting a drink. But just say, no, thank you. A lemonade is fine. The last thing I'm going to tell you is don't ever hold your drink in your right hand. Always hold your drink in your left hand, because a white clammy hand, a wet hand, a cold hand will feel clammy, and it'll be awkward when somebody shakes your hand. So those are the two types of group interviews, Abby, is one is around a table and one is in a social setting. The goal is that you're showing your camaraderie to your competitors. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, good. Okay, you had a question, Omar.
Yeah, just this kind of goes along with like the dress code. Like a lot of businesses now just go like just dress business casual.
Great question.
Do you suggest that, or do you go above and beyond?
I always dress in a suit. You can this is going to sound crazy. You can always remove clothes, but you can't add them, right? But in my mind, I recommend dressing a little bit more professional. So for instance, for guys, I recommend a white shirt. I recommend a single-breasted suit. I recommend a conservative color like a navy or a black or a gray. And I recommend a tie. Learn how to tie a double Windsor. Double Windsor is key. And unfortunately, so many people tie a single Windsor and it looks sloppy like you tied it in your car. So learn how to tie a double Windsor. But then if you get to the interview and you notice nobody else is wearing a tie, you can easily remove your tie in the bathroom and put it in your bag, but you're still dressing professionally. I always recommend guys to wear jackets. Because again, even if they're in jeans and a polo shirt, you can always remove your jacket and roll up your sleeves. But if you're not dressed that way out of the gate, there's a fear that I might be in a suit and you show up with Dockers and a polo shirt. And so to me, I'm not asking you to, don't wear a vest, don't overdress. I'm not asking you to have a hanky in your pocket or cufflinks. You know, if your dad gives you anything as you walk out of the house, just put them in the glove compartment and don't put them on for the interview. But you don't want to overdress, but I believe in dressing a little bit higher than business casual for the interview. For women, go ahead.
Oh,
Shannon.
no, I was just going to say, back when we used to be able to have lead events and events that we could go to in person and see each other, we would often, for some of the events, promote business casual. And I have been impressed time and time again how Delta Sigs, especially the collegiate members, more so than the alumni, show up in suits and professional attire. They have taken it a step above even for our lead events, knowing that they may meet a future employer or somebody there.
Totally.
So it's impressive, just to make sure you're, a step above, but not too far, like Tim said.
I'll tell you, you're judged in the first 7 seconds. So when you walk into my office, you're being judged in the first 7 seconds. So my recommendation is you want that first impression to be professional. For women, it's the same thing. I recommend, nothing too low cut, no camisoles only or anything like that, but like a silk or a silk like fabric, a blouse, pantsuit is totally acceptable. It doesn't have to be a skirt. Nothing too high cut, nothing too low cut. You don't want a mini skirt, but you don't want a Little House on the Prairie either. But something professional where I look at you for the first 7 seconds and you won me over. And now I'm focused on your skills, not what you're wearing. That makes sense? Now, be careful. Like some women like to put like lapel pins and so forth. Just be cautious. Like wearing a cross lapel pin to show that you're a Christian is fine. And if that's what you want to do, that's okay. But you have no idea if I'm Buddhist or Jewish or atheist, or you have no idea who I am. So there's just a sense, like same thing with political tags. I had a guy come into an interview and he had a political symbol on his suit. And it's fine, but I if we hire the guy, I'd probably say take it off your suit because you don't have no idea what a client supports, and why draw attention to something that doesn't need to be attention. So if you are going to wear a lapel pin, just something professional, nice looking is fine, something like that. And the same thing for colors for women: navy, gray, black. Stay away from red. Stay away from pastels. On both cases, men and women, I recommend 100% wool. I know it's hot, but it lays better, it dry cleans better, and it'll last you longer, and it's more professional. So those are and for women, no open toe shoes, one ring per hand, one earring per ear, no nose rings, no lip rings, no tongue rings, only because I completely get distracted. Like I had a person with a tongue ring, and I couldn't help myself but thinking, what did she have for lunch? Like, does it get wrapped around the tongue ring? Like, didn't it hurt? I mean, you start wandering, your mind starts wandering. So just, again, the goal is to win over 7 seconds. And then I'm focused on your skills. Omar, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
Tim, I have a question.
Please.
So in the event somebody is doing an in-person interview now, which I think is a pretty rare thing happening, but if you were to be asked to go to a company to interview with someone, what is the etiquette right now with COVID for handshakes and things like that? If you're not comfortable with it, is it okay to say, I would rather not because of the pandemic, or is that?
Corporate America is now so used to this, and it's an awkward wave. We both do it. People come into my office, and we're closed, so we will only go into the office on certain occasions. But somebody comes in, and you're like, hey, how are you? Like if you wave right out of the gate, it's awkward, but they know that, because it's weird to wave to somebody in the face-to-face, right? But if you wave to them, they know that you're not going to do it. I don't recommend an elbow. Like, don't come at me with an elbow, because I think that's crazy. And it's interesting. I find a lot of business professionals just out of habit still trying to shake a hand. So if they put out their hand, just come and wave and say, hey, nice to meet you. Awkward times, I know. Make sure you wear a mask. Take a mask with you. I know it sounds weird, but don't take it off until they give you permission to take it off. Because now I can't imagine in today's day and age, a interviewer wearing a mask in the office with you wearing a mask. That would be a weird cultural thing. But if they do keep their mask on, keep yours on. Part of the strategy and an unfortunate aspect of it right now, but I just recommend a mask. And even the mask, be careful what kind of mask you take. Don't wear a skeleton mask, or don't wear something it's fun, but it's going to draw attention. Just like a surgical mask or a regular mask that's colorless, black or blue, that's fine. But good question. Okay, let's now go to a Zoom call, because your face-to-face is in person. You're going to do the same thing this way. So here's the things I'm going to tell you. So first of all, prepare the same way. Understand who you're talking to. Understand my company. The nice thing is you can have all your notes laid out in front of you. Dress up for the Zoom call. Get on the Zoom call. Practice. So practice dialing the number 15 minutes ahead of time. Data, your question was, when do I come on? Practice dialing and then get out of the room just to make sure you know the number. Make sure your connectivity is good. Test your camera. Test your mic. You can do all of that in Zoom before ever entering the room. So test all the Zoom and then join the call 5 minutes ahead of time. In the setting, the room that you're in is absolutely critical to this interview, because not only am I judging what you're wearing, but I'm judging the room that you're in. So for instance, I did a female interview about a month ago via Zoom, and she was in her bedroom. and the bed was not made. The bed was right behind her camera. And it was just awkward. Like, I'm in this woman's bedroom, her bed's not made. I'm looking at them. I had one guy on to the back right. It was his bathroom, and the bathroom door was open, and it was toilet. So I'm looking at this candidate, and his toilet's in his background. So again, I'm just thinking to myself, so you need to be completely self-aware when you're on a Google call. So for instance, if you notice, I have nothing behind me. I don't have a lot of distractions. My camera is eye level. So now I have a double chin, so I don't want my camera looking at me anyway or looking up my nose, but you want the camera to be at eye level. So if you have a laptop, elevate your laptop, put it on a series of books so your camera is eye level. Make sure you have a light be in front of you, not behind you. So like right now, I'm going to show you this. I have a portable camera, but I have in my office, I have these, they're for green screen. So they're lamps that light my face up, So now my face is lit, but there's not light behind me. So be careful what's behind you. Try not to do it in the bedroom. If you have to do it in a bedroom, try to face the camera so I can't see your bed. Don't let me see your toilet. Make sure your bed is made if you have to do it. Dress up and make sure your mic is working. And I know it sounds crazy, but one investment you might consider making, and I know you're college students, but like right now, I have a Logitech camera. It's called a 922 camera. The camera was about $150, but I use this thing every day. And the quality of this is HD, so it's better than my laptop. And then the mic I'm using is a Yeti, a Blue Yeti. And this mic was $150. Now, granted, I understand you're on college budget, so I'm not recommending spending $300. But buying a portable mic that's USB, that has a good quality, buying a good camera is an investment that I believe your generation is going to have more Zoom calls than any generation before. We might not go back. I know this sounds nuts. I have 26 offices. I'm negotiating with my landlords right now because I'm not sure we're going to go back, because I don't think people want to get back on the commute. I think people love their work-life balance. So we're going to learn how to live with this. So those are some recommendations that I have. Everything else is the same. Win me over, ask a personal question, ask your 3 questions, take notes, make sure you're looking at the camera and not your laptop. Like when I'm talking to you, make sure I'm looking right at the camera when you're giving answers. Make sure you prepare the house. Put a note on the door, put a sock on the door, put a stop sign on the door. Don't interrupt my call. I have an interview. That's totally acceptable. If you have roommates, let them know that you're going to be on it. If you have dogs, try to crate them or not have interruptions. It's the little details that on a Zoom call are magnified, because everything, like right now, I'm looking around your rooms and I can see, like my eyes are focused on other things. That's going to be the same way in an interview. Does that all make sense?
It does. Hey, Tim, we had a question come in on the chat.
Please.
Is it okay if your bed is in the background if your room is nice and neat? Not ideal, but would it be okay?
Absolutely. If you have to have your bed, I don't want you to turn your bed upside down or have the camera facing straight up. No, I think if that's the room that you have and that's the option that you have, great.
Yes. Yeah.
If you can, like these lamps that I just pointed, for $99, I bought the lamps and a green screen that goes behind me. And I can put up, I don't have it right now, but I can put up images behind me. Again, that might be an investment you make down the road. That might be something that companies give you. So having that, if you don't want people to see your room, having that is fine as well. A green screen. Yes, Dana.
Just another question. I'm currently at my home, but when I'm at school, I have posters on my wall that I think one of them is how you make a margarita and stuff. What should I do? Because it's the only place where my desk could actually be seated. But I know that's not a good look.
Well, here's the take. If you're interviewing with my company and our culture is very unique, our culture is really fun, it might be a conversation piece where you might say, listen, I apologize. I'm in my dorm room. I know there's a couple posters. This was the best. So it could be a conversational piece, but there's a risk, because if my dad was interviewing you, he would jump right to, and my dad's 85 Italian. He's like George Costanza's dad. So my dad would be like, oh my gosh, college kids drink too much. So the only thing I would tell you is that if that's the first impression you want to leave, my recommendation is take the posters down. I would rather have nothing on the wall than I would posters that could come up in conversation without you knowing it. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. That's why I thought I'd ask, just for another opinion.
Sure. And then Beth, you brought up a great idea on the chat. Usually we push the desk against the wall. We can turn the desk around and put the wall so you're facing your back. So, I mean, there's a couple little strategies you could do. And again, it really depends who you're interviewing with. My goal of these Zoom interviews is to win the first impression. And so if you believe that you're going to do the best first impression by being dressed up and not having a margarita in the background, I would probably do that and put it back up after the interview.
Yeah, Omar asked about what about using Zoom backgrounds that are available? And while you're taking a quick sip there, I think it's fine, but beware. I can't do Zoom backgrounds because bookshelves, there's too many angles and stuff happening. If you've got a clean space behind you like Tim has, or even like Dylan has, chances are you're going to have success with a Zoom background. But for me to put one up,
right,
it's choppy. So
and I would test it to see if it looks good. But if you're too busy, as soon as you move your head, it looks like a cloud. So again, it's just another first impression. So just those are the little details that are exemplified or they're magnified on a Zoom call, is your background, what you're wearing, what you sound like, and what you look like. Because this is all I have now. There's no personal interaction other than this.
I have another quick question.
Go ahead.
This is about like follow-ups post-interview. So I know like a general rule of thumb that I've been taught is like 24 hours post-interview is like the appropriate time to follow up. But I usually try and do it like right after so I don't forget. Do you think it's too much or like too pushy to email the like interviewer right after you hang up the phone? Or
I recommend 24 hours because I think it looks almost too quick. Like you wrote it in your car real quick, or you had standard text that you cut and paste and sent it to me. And here's what I want you to say when you email me. An email's fine. 10 years ago, I would have said a handwritten note is better, but an email is fine, thanking me for my time. But make sure you reference something we talked about, because then it connects me with you and your interview. Because you remember, my recruiters are doing, they might interview 10 people a day. So if you just send it in and say, hey, thank you very much, this is from Abby, I appreciate your time, that's nice. But if you said, thank you very much for your time, I really enjoy talking about the Detroit Lions, or I really enjoy talking about your band, or I enjoy talking about the opportunity of you guys expanding into Europe. Because then it ties you and it shows that you were listening in the interview. But I would wait 24 hours is my recommendation. Dana.
What are your thoughts on, like, do you ask if you can take notes? Like, I've been taking notes and it's not on the screen. What do I
typically, because your eyes are going to go off the screen. So ask me, is it okay? I have some notes. I have some questions written down. Is it okay if I take notes? And they're going to absolutely say yes. And here's the deal. If they say no, it kind of gives you a sense for who they are. And do you want to work for a company if they're like, no, Dana, do not take notes? What the hell's that? Why would you want to work for that company, right? So again, the interview process is for you to win them over, but you're also getting to know their culture. You're getting to figure out, do I want to work for that firm? Understand what I said at the beginning of the call. This is a candidate's market. I need you. You have the ability to literally interview and take jobs with 3 or 4 companies. And so as you're interviewing with me, I want you evaluating my firm as much as I'm evaluating you. So that's the answer. Okay. So now the other 2 interviews. So I mentioned a phone interview. Then we went through face-to-face interview. Now I want to talk about a meal interview and a group interview. So let's do a group first, since Abby asked that question. So a group interview, like I said, it's typically called a stress interview. And what they're trying to do is get you to freak out. They're trying to figure out if you'll be stressed out. So here's my recommendation. Treat it like a face-to-face. Show up 15 minutes early. Make sure you get to know the receptionist and tell them that you're there and be respectful. Then you're going to walk into a room and there's going to be typically 3 or 4 people sitting in a conference room, and they're going to have their notes in front of you, and they're going to say, sit down, like you have a giant spotlight on you. My recommendation is to take your time and win every person over. Don't answer just to the boss, because in the room will be a senior person and potentially the team. So if every answer you give is only answering to the most senior person, the others will be offended. So what you want to do is take your time, and they're going to ask you a series of questions like, Abby, tell me how you manage your time. Abby, how did you balance work and life? Abby, how did you do the fundraising? You were the VP of fundraising for the chapter. How much money did you raise? What type of events did you do? they're firing questions at you to see how you act. So what you want to do is take your time. And if you don't understand the question, ask them to repeat it. Totally acceptable. Or could you rephrase the question? Ask them that. That'll give you a little bit more time to think. But the goal is to kind of fire questions to see how you react. And then you asking a question to each of the people, each of the different people in the room is fantastic. So ask, how long have you been with the organization? What do you like about the company? Can you tell me a little bit about the team dynamic? John, could you tell me a little bit about, what has the team been working on, or what's the biggest accomplishment that the team has had this year? It shows that you're engaging. And that's what a group interview. So the only reason I bring that up is some of you may face a group interview, and I don't want you walking in freaking out and seeing 5 people. But it's the same process. Just take your time and answer every question. The 4th interview is a meal interview. And I mentioned a little bit, I typically take candidates on a meal interview when it's a customer-facing job, like sales or marketing or market research, or any of the jobs that you would have to interact with the public, because I want to see how you react. So a couple tips to a meal interview. First of all, treat it like a formal interview. Dress up like you would a regular interview. Eat before you go. Let me rephrase that. Eat something before you go. The meal interview is to not necessarily eat a meal. Even though you're going to order something and you're going to nibble and you're going to eat, the majority of the talking is going to be done by you. So eat something before you go so you're not staring at my sandwich starving. So eat something before you go. Make sure nothing's on your face, and don't eat on the way to the interview. Eat something and make sure you're cleaned up. Take money with you, just in case. Now, if a person invited you to a meal interview and asks you to pay, that's going to tell you a lot about the person. But the last thing you want to do is not have a wallet, not have money with you to pay for dinner. Now, one worry that you're going to have is, what do I order for lunch? And you want to ask it's okay to ask the interviewer, what do you recommend for lunch? If you've never been to the restaurant, don't ask them what's good here, because they might say the lobster is unbelievable. But then you order a lobster and then they're like, I'll have a sandwich. So ask them, what do you recommend for lunch? Totally acceptable. Take your time eating. Treat everybody with utmost manners. So when you get there, talk to the hostess or talk to the person seating you. Hi, good morning. Nice to see you. Thank you very much for seating us. Just be nice. Don't over nice, but just be nice. When the waiter comes or the server comes, again, treat them with respect. Never say, and this is a rule for your life, not even interviews. Don't send food back. Don't send food back. If you ever worked in the restaurant industry, you don't want to know what happens in your food or your French fries when you send it back. And I had a candidate, literally, this happened. He ordered piping hot fries. And I remember looking at him like, what did you just say? And he goes, yeah, I like my fries to be piping hot. Yeah, so do I. I would love piping hot fries, but it typically doesn't come. The fries arrived. They weren't piping hot. He snapped his fingers at the waiter. The server came over. He said, can you send these fries back? He immediately killed the interview. I didn't hire the guy. Because again, I'm looking at you to see how will you react to clients. And if you're treating the waiter, if you're snapping your fingers, if you're sending food back, what would my client think when you're talking about a multi-million-dollar deal? So a meal interview is just that. It's a show. It's an interview. It is a formal interview. It just happens to be in public. So make sure your manners are there. Make sure, if you've ever done, like right now, hold out your hands and do okay in both hands. Right now, if everybody could humor me for a moment. So you do it like this. One is a B and one is a D. Look at the letters. On your left hand, it's a B. On your right hand is a D. Bread and drink. So whenever now don't put it on the table, but if you sit down at an open conference table and you're ready to sit down for the interview, just kind of do bread and drink and you'll figure out where's my drink and where's my bread. Again, but then have a napkin on your lap. Little things like that will go a long way in a meal interview. So we covered 4 types of interviews. We covered a phone interview, typically lasts about 20 minutes. I'm trying to screen you out, so make sure you prepare as much as you can. We talked about a face-to-face interview, both in person and Zoom. We talked about a group interview. We talked about a meal interview. Some of the questions that you can ask, like, tell me about what are the traits of your best performers? Where do you see your team in the next 90 days? Where do you see the company in the next 2 years? What has been the biggest challenge to overcome during COVID? All of those questions are really good questions. And then make sure you're closing the interview with, if I don't hear from you, can I give you a call back? Now, the one thing I didn't mention is I mentioned on the phone interview not to talk about compensation. It's okay to talk about it in the second and third and fourth interview. So this is when you want to talk about comp. But here's my recommendation. Make sure you research. So go to compensation.com, go to monster.com, go to salary.com, all the above websites, salary.com, compensation.com. They're all compensation calculators. So you can go into salary.com. You're going to put in the title of the job, how many years of experience they're asking for, where the geographic location is, and what industry it's in. So they're going to give you a range for how much that job is worth. So if you interviewed my company, you might say, I'm interviewing for a recruiter role. And it might give you a range that we will pay 50 to 70 grand a year, or 50 to 60 grand a year. Typically, it's called broad banding, but typically in a band, a salary band, it's going to be at about a $10,000 band. Here's the reason I want you to research this. When I ask you, how much money do you want to make your first year? I want you to respond, money is not my driving force at this point. I'm really interested in the opportunity. I'm interested in the teamwork. And once I know the role and responsibilities, then we can talk about comp. But what I want you to do is if they push it, if they say, okay, Omar, I know, I read Augustine's book, I did a seminar, blah, blah, blah. Really, Omar, how much money do you want to make a year? I want you to come with about a $10,000 range. And if you read on compensation.com that it was 60 to 70, then I want you to come in at 65. So the middle of the range. And here's the way I want you to say it. I want you to say, based on my research, write those words down. Based on my research, I'm really hoping to be closer to 65. Now, understand, you got to do some research. So make sure you're in the ballpark, because if you're telling me 65 and I'm willing to pay 40, there's going to be a disconnect. So what you can do in the second and third interview, and here's a strategy to negotiate. Think about the 10% rule. So the first thing I'm going to do, so for instance, if in Dylan, I'm going to offer you the job, and I'm going to say, Dylan, thanks, and listen to my words. Dylan, thanks so much for doing this journey with us. We interviewed you. You interviewed 7 people. Thank you very much for your time. I want to offer you a job of a sales professional, a business development manager. And I want to offer you a job at $50,000 a year. I'd like you to start in 2 weeks. Now, listen, I've already ordered your laptop. I ordered your business cards. We set up your office. We're all excited about you joining the team. Here's the offer letter. If you could sign it right now, that would be great. I'm trying to close the job as a recruiter. So what I want you to say, Dylan, is thank you very much for the offer. I really appreciate the offer of $50,000. Can you give me a day or two to talk it over with my family? And I don't care if you're talking to the dog. I don't care if you're talking to a family or a friend. The goal is that you're going to call them back. Don't try to answer them in person, or don't try to do it immediately. When you come back 24 hours later, when you call, I want you to think of the 10% rule. Thank you very much, Mr. Augustine. I really appreciate the offer of $50,000 a year. I was really hoping to be closer to 55 to 60. So see what you just did? You added 10%, but you did it in a humble way. You weren't demanding. You didn't say, I need 55, but you were saying, I really appreciate the offer of 50. Is there any way, or I was hoping for, based on my research, I was hoping for 55. They're going to answer 3 things, and I know we're running late, but they're going to answer 3 things. They're going to say, no, Dylan, take the job for 50 or not, and then you're going to have to make a decision. Or they're going to say, you know what? Yes, I will give you 55, which is the best thing ever. Or they're going to say, let's meet in the middle. I'll give you 52.5. So for saying that sentence, you just made $2,500. Most lucrative sentence you've ever said in your life. Now, if they say no, Dylan, if they say no, we really got to stick to 50,000, and they're going to say words like team member equity and everything else, and we got to stick to 50. What I want you to say is, you know what? I'm really interested in your company. You're one of my top 5 firms. If I accept the job at 50, is there any way that I could have a salary review and a performance review in 6 months? You've just locked in your wage increase in 6 months. You're going to bust your hump in the first 6 months to do a great job. I'm going to save 5 months. I'm going to save $5,000 for 6 months. So it's a win-win all the way around. And every employer will say, absolutely, I would grant you that. Does that make sense to everybody? 10% over the phone based on my research. And and ask for a wage review in 6 months if they don't give it to you. I apologize. It's like drinking from a fire hose. There's a lot of information. I know, and I talk super fast. But I guess I just wanted to leave my contact information in case any of you have to jump off. So my email is the best email, and it's T as in Tim, Augustine, and that's AUGUSTINE at atwell-group.com. So it's ATWELL group, GROUP.com. So atwell-group.com. Here's all that I ask. If you email me, put in the subject line that we met on this call, DSP interview call, something like that, just so I know it's you. But if you want to send me a draft of your resume, again, I'll rip it apart. I'll mark it up. I'll scan it. I'll take a picture and send it to you just to give you my perspective. And if you're interested in hearing more about Atwell, I'd love to talk to you. I am recruiting for a recruiter right now. If you know anybody interested in recruiting, we're hiring for that job right now. But I guess let me stop there. Any final questions, Shanda? I know we're a couple minutes late, but any burning questions that you guys have? Awesome. Well, that's my contact information. Shoot me an email. If you don't hear from me in a week, email me again. You're not bugging me. I have ADD. I forget. I lose emails. I'm all over the place. So just to email me again, and it's not offensive at all. Just say, hey, I sent your resume a week ago. Could you give me your advice? Awesome.
Thank you so much. And thank you for stepping in for our
Absolutely.
cancellation due to family issues. I will contact all of you that were registered for this event once we reschedule with Jim, probably in early January. So if you'd like to attend a different interviewing session, different perspective and thoughts, we'll make sure that opportunity is there for you. But Tim, thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you all for attending. I hope it was helpful. You'll be getting a survey in the next couple of days. Fill that out for us so we can keep bringing you more sessions and webinars that are helpful.
Especially if it's a 5 score on the feedback is great.
Absolutely.
If it's a 1, don't turn it in. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Good luck to everybody.
Thanks,
Hope to hear from
everyone.
you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Thank you.